Hey, it's Mazzy. Welcome back. It's the Music Stupid number 76. I should have waited for this round of records for next time because obviously next time will be 77. And these are records from 1977, all of them. These are punk, new wave, the crossover, post punk before post punk even existed. You can't have post punk before you have punk, right? Or at the time. So I'll get into that a little bit. But I thought this would be a great thing because recently, obviously, there's been all this talk about the Sex Pistols album, that great punk album from 1977 that Rhino Hi-Fi released as a somewhat, like, people call it audiophile, and a lot of comments I got on those videos was punk's not audiophile, but that is an excellent recording. And as I was thinking about that, these are all British records from 1977 that came out that year, and they're all really good recordings, recorded by good producers and good studios. These aren't like do-it-yourself records that came out of printing 100 copies of a 45 and leaving in a store and selling it as a, one-off or something like that. These are mostly major label releases or smaller labels that were really building a following in 1977. Now, in 1977, I was 22, 23, and I realized most of these bands are about my age or maybe no more than 4 years younger and 1 or 2 years older. So this is my generation of music. And a lot of this music obviously is reaction of the bloated prog and California sound, the easy listening stuff that was happening, what would become yacht rock and everything else. Now, there doesn't have to be an either or. Now, these are not hardcore punk bands like LA and San Francisco and some other cities. Even really, very few of the CBGB's bands were more hardcore, maybe the Dead Boys or something. But again, this is not a competition. And before you say you forgot this or that or those, these are just the ones I chose, okay? And there's some I don't have, but this is just 6 records I decided to showcase today because, and the first one I'm going to show is the very first UK full-length punk album, and that is The Damned. What a great cover. Now, this is my original copy on Stiff Records. This was produced by Nick Lowe. This came out early 1977, so this kind of starts out that year in punk rock. And, they went through some changes, and of course, they got even more produced as they went on. Didn't see them until 1979, which I'm trying to think if that was their first time to America, but obviously a little different configuration, not as quite energetic as this. But this is a really good sounding punk record. Not all of it is intense, in your face, a frontal, produced by Nick Lowe, of course, who also this year produced Elvis Costello, and we know him with his great songwriting. But this is a wonderful, wonderful record. This isn't the very first pressing. I think there's a different back cover, as I recall. But this is my import, and I've always loved the Stiff label, and I always loved not just the Stiff label in general, but the actual label, and they have a variety of labels and occasionally, but I love that label. What a great artistic label. And I don't know if you don't know the great motto they had: if it ain't stiff, it ain't worth a fuck. What a what a great motto, and really appropriate. It's a pivotal record in the punk scene, especially in the UK punk scene, but all punk records. And again, it's not as hard looking back on it after what we're going to come up on 50 years in 2 years. This is not an intense record. It's great. It's a frontal. It's really not that political, but it is a little assault-like, but not as political as the Sex Pistols. But it's a good recording. So starting out with The Damned from 1977, self-titled. Next, you can't talk about punk without talking about The Clash, especially in 1977. This is their debut album on CBS Record. This also is my original UK copy. Very different than the American version that wouldn't come out, I think, till 1979 is when the original came out. I saw The Clash 4 times, 3 times intact like this, 1 time after Mick Jones left. Good, but not as great as they were with the original four members. This is a very political record. All the songs are great. This is a perfect record, a perfect punk record. The best punk record of 1977? Maybe. There's other records here that aren't quite as punk that cross over. So this is not simply a punk presentation only, but it comes from the subgenres and the music coming around the UK at the time that at least I was getting when I would order imports for our store in 1977. Of course, you have Remote Control, I'm So Bored with the USA, White Riot. I mean, there's a lot of stuff obviously going on in the UK, political, the austerity stuff that's happening. That's why you have songs like Police and Thieves, Career Opportunities here. I actually sometimes feel a little guilty saying I kind of have a soft spot, not better, but for the version of Career Opportunities with the young lad, young Brit singing on the Sex Pistols movie soundtrack, Great Rock and Roll Swindle. But a lot of Brits I know think it's shite. And it probably is, but I still have a soft spot to it. Almost like easy listening, Clash. London's Burning on here. What's My Name? Hate and War. Of course, the track Police and Thieves, which is the longest track on the album, has obviously, it's a reggae influenced song. And of course, a lot of the, especially the British punk bands, were more influenced with reggae than the American ones for the most part at the time. And of course, the Clash would go on to use that throughout all their records to some extent there. But this is a wonderful record. The debut Clash self-titled record, British, from 1977. The next album from 1977 is actually their second album of the year. I didn't include the first album. I don't know why I like this album. The first one obviously is the more punk. This has more variety. And in reality, this is the first album by The Jam that I ever got, because I got a promo from the American record label. This is the American version of This Is the Modern World. This is the uncensored version, different configuration of songs than the UK. You can see this warning sticker on the cover, gold stamp promo. But this is a fantastic record in the States. It's on Polydor Records. And of course, Paul Weller, leads the band, and so British, so mod, reminiscent of the Who and the Kinks, that mid-60s period of music, and pushing it forward into a little bit of a punk thing. Great hooks, great melodies, just great playing from this power trio. One of the great, great bands. I saw them only once when they came through. I don't remember exactly what year. I'm thinking maybe 78, 79, but I'm really not sure. But the songs on here are great. Of course, the opening track, Modern World, London Traffic, Light from a Window. They do one cover of the Wilson Pickett, In the Midnight Hour. London Girl, I believe that's one of the tracks that's censored on here. Here Comes the Weekend. But what a wonderful record. And again, different than the others. But that's what's great about the punk scene in the UK and in America, that it's not just one vision, one style. There's a lot of people who don't follow punk or never got into punk, that all they think it is assault, this really shitty guitar playing and drumming, and artists that can't play the instruments, that really kind of just go over and assault and yell and scream. And there is that hardcore. None of these bands are hardcore punk, but these are bands that I latched onto because of the partially new wave scene, the better hooks, emulating a lot of 60s bands, but kind of like all the pre-Sgt. Pepper, pre-1967 bands that were more of the garage sound and the mod sound, and not that heavily produced, multi-layered effects, even though there are some overdubs on these albums too. But of course, what a wonderful record. Again, the second album they put out in 1977, these bands were really churning them out, and more some than others, but what a wonderful record. The Jam, This Is the Modern World. And now I submit to you Wire's Pink Flag. Incredible record. Now, this was very different at the time. This was a more diverse record into the punk scene. There's a lot more layers. And again, this was recorded really well. This is recorded at Adavision Studio, which is in the Fitzrovia district of London. I don't know if it still exists, but that's where I stayed. That's the neighborhood I stayed in the Airbnb a year ago when I was in London. And a lot of bands, well-recorded bands recorded. All the prog bands were recorded there. Kate Bush recorded there. Yes recorded there. It was The Move recorded there. So it wasn't just a fly-by-night thing, but this is a record. There's more depth in it. A lot of air. I hate to talk about the soundscapes of things, but compared to some of the other punk records here, there's a lot of stuff happening. Yes, you have the short, especially on side two. Side two has something like, what, 8, 9 songs? 3 or 4 of them are like maybe a minute or a minute and a half length. You got Strange, which is a more interesting song that reminds me a little of the Crazy Horse sound or even the Faces. So you got a lot of retro stuff happening with a lot of what we would later call post-punk. This is post-punk before there was barely punk. What a great record. This is a record you need to obviously take your time and dive into. It's not the affront assault like some of the other records or even the hooks in the same way as a jam. Although there are a couple of songs that have melody laden, like new wavy kind of hooks too. But it's probably has the more variety, except maybe for my last offering here. But this is The Wire, again, another album from 1977 from the UK bands into the punk scene. Now, this is the furthest from a punk rock album. This is a new wave album that mixes disco, soul music, to funk, to pub rock, all together, and new wave. And this is an incredible album that was a sleeper. This is my original copy, again, on Stiff Records. New Boots and Panties by Ian Dury. Now, Ian Dury's debut album, I have his first 3 albums, and this album took some time to build, and obviously on the local radio stations, the FM stations in San Francisco, and especially the college station, I think it was KUSF, the song that those radio stations were playing was Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. It's not even on the album. These were the days, like with old Beatle records, a lot of bands would put out singles and they didn't want to put it on the album. I'm not sure later, years later, it might have been on a CD. There was a 12-inch single of it, but it's not on this record. It's too bad, but still, this is a great record nonetheless. Obviously, it opens up with Wake Up and Make Love to Me, Sweet Gene Vincent, which starts very slowly and very melodically, and then it jumps up into a rock thing. So there's a retro rock sound to this, but also a good dance beat to some of this stuff. I'm Partial to Your Abracadabra. Ian Dury has a very thick East End London accent in the music here, but it's very creative and really interesting. Again, you know, the influences of American music is all over this, and of course, along with pub rock and a little bit of that punk thing, but a great band, a wonderful record, clever record. And literally you have a song called Clever Trevor that opens up side 2, which is great. And I think every track on here is great. Another record, another release on Stiff Records. Ian Dury and the Blockheads, and this is New Boots and Panties on Stiff Records, 1977. To me, my favorite album in this collection. Now, all these records I enjoy, but for whatever reason, I like this because it's great songwriting. It's very unique. It's not to take away from the Clash or the Jam or any of those other artists, but the songwriting here, to me, really hooked me at the time, and that is the debut, My Aim is True, from Elvis Costello. Also on Stiff Records, also produced by Nick Lowe. This is a wonderful album. This is a tight album, not overproduced, very loose, very rich in terms of this band playing. Interesting enough, the band who backed Elvis on this record was a band from Marin County, California called Clover. They had relocated to London. They were signed to a label, I think it was Phonogram maybe, or Polygram in London, to record and put out an album, which they did. But they were the backup band. They would later become Huey Lewis and the News. But Huey Lewis is not on this album. But the band is tight. The band is killer on this record. But the songwriting makes it. Of course, it opens up with Welcome to the Working Week. Short, quick, in your face and out. I love that record. Miracle Man as well, No Dancing. it's just the tightness of this band. You wouldn't expect this band to be a Marin County band from the 1970s. We all think of, well, Huey Lewis, but that was a little later. But we all think of that mellow sound of Mill Valley and Tamalpais High with David Crosby and the Jefferson Starship and all that kind of stuff was happening in Marin County, or the Youngbloods. You don't think of this power, the powerhouse they were. There's a bit of pub rock on here as well, like the Ian Dury, but his songwriting is great. His vocals is great. His persona, I think it was Stiff's recommendation to change his first name, and so he did to Elvis, and Elvis Costello. There we go. Declan McManus, his real name. I was so fortunate, I believe, some point towards the end, I believe, of 1977, I saw his very first show in America at the old Waldorf, the Bill Graham produced club, because KSAN Radio, the program music director there, Bonnie Simmons, was the first person to play Elvis, or at least the first radio station to break Elvis Costello. Now, he wasn't massive in a way, but he was a big figure in music and would early show up on Saturday Night Live as well. The covers here would be various colors here. This is my original UK album on Stiff. I do have the American one, blue. I can't remember if there's a slight track difference between the American and the US. The American was on Columbia Records. Welcome to the Working Week goes into Miracle Man, No Dancing, Blame It on Cain, and of course, one of the most beautiful songs ever written, Allison. Side 2 starts out with this wonderful classic, The Angel's Gonna Wear My Red Shoes, going into Lesson 0, Mystery Dance, Pay It Easy, I'm Not Angry, and Waiting for the End of the World. Every track on here. This is literally a perfect album. Not an affrontal punk record, but coming out of that school of punk, the new wave thing, the adventurous music that was coming out, influenced again by the mid-1960s in a way, the garage rock also, but takes it further, kind of really scales back what was happening on 16 and 24 track studios in California and in New York, and in London too, from major artists. What a great sound, and what a great reaction to the bloating of music in pop music from the 1970s. Great stuff, yes, but this is a wonderful, wonderful record. And these are 6 great albums from 1977, all really well recorded. So don't ever try to tell me that you can't have a new wave punk record that's not well recorded. But it comes down to the music and the songwriting. And out of all these, I would say this is probably the best in terms of songwriting. But they're all great albums. Not a competition, is it? But thanks for watching, and Mazzy loves you.